This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jespersen.
Game on, as they say. The first throne speech delivered under Mark Carney's government by the King. King Charles, his 20th visit to Canada, and a throne speech dramatically different than that of Carney's predecessor, Justin Trudeau, on a number of fronts. Supriya Dwivedi, fresh off a stint as senior advisor to the former prime minister and a wonderful friend of this show, is going to dig into the throne speech, the significance of what was said, what wasn't said, that coming up in just a moment. And then our eye on Alberta Business today. Shauna Feth's delivering exactly that, the president and CEO of the Alberta Chambers of Commerce. What were Alberta entrepreneurs and business persons looking for through this throne speech? We'll touch on the Alberta cabinet shuffle and a whole lot more. We have got you covered in this episode from top to bottom, friends. Plus, a very special feature from our friends at Tourism Jasper, an all-time favorite tourist attraction. A wonderful visitor attraction is open again now in the Jasper National Park area, and we're going to get that for you in MyJasper Memories. That's brought to you every Wednesday right here on the show. We're going to hit the ground running. First, I want to let you know that this episode of Real Talk is presented with the support of our friends at We Know Training. You can check them out online at wkt.ca. Buy training, deliver programs, and build success. You ever finish a course and wonder, through your professional development, does this actually count for anything? We Know Training doesn't just deliver the training, they deliver proof that you've done the work and earned the credential. And that's a big deal. Verifiable, secure, stored in your digital wallet. This is the future of how learning should work. You can check out their tailored solutions for training that matters. Understand better how they're providing high-quality training for regulated industries. That's a big deal. Again, on their website, that's We Know Training at wkt.ca.
Every time I come to Canada, a little more of Canada seeps into my bloodstream, and from there, straight to my heart. I've always had the greatest admiration for Canada's unique identity, which is recognized across the world for bravery and sacrifice in defense of national values, and for the diversity and kindness of Canadians.
It's not a sound that Canadians are used to. The voice of King Charles delivering the throne speech, as he did during a visit to Ottawa less than 24 hours ago. Supriya Dwivedi, good friend of this show, joining us to get into it. It's nice to see your face. Thanks for making time for us. Bit of a different vibe with Charles and Camilla delivering the honor.
Yeah, I think it was a different vibe is definitely one way to put it. I think it was a good different vibe, though. I'm not necessarily a huge fan of the monarchy as an institution. I am, South Asian by heritage. I was raised by Indian immigrant parents, and I grew up in Quebec. So I don't hold necessarily a lot of fondness for it as, just as a capital I institution. And I'm no fan of the royal family. But I think it's really important that first of all, when the sovereign of Canada does come to town, you get just the most sort of best reminder, I think is the best way to put it, in terms of what kind of stability in having a constitutional monarchy sort of represents. And in having the system, Canada avoids so much of the mess that the US is in right now. So even my own, kind of cold, dead, somewhat anti-monarchist heart was quite warmed yesterday at seeing all of the pomp and circumstance and seeing the people lining up, how can you be about seeing that many smiling people in the streets of Ottawa and just genuinely having a good, proud moment.
Yeah. Hey, listen, I'm thrilled to hear that you're cold, dead, somewhat anti-monarchist heart was moved by this. And there's some interesting polling I want to get to. Not right now, because I don't want to lead with how Canadians feel about the monarchy, but it has kickstarted or spurred those conversations that never really die. And we'll get to that before the interview is out for sure, before we have our conversation finished. But the general theme that the King delivered, I'm still not used to saying the King, by the way. I'm still getting used to it. It's been a while. I'm still getting used to it. But there was no listen, Justin Trudeau well, and a lot of people were comparing his first throne speech to Mark Carney's first one, because those are big ones. These are ones when the new prime minister kind of sets the tone. And Justin Trudeau was talking a lot about social supports and Canadian values and the middle class and kind of individual Canadians or Canadian family units' bottom lines. And that's not really the tone that Mark Carney took at all.
No, I mean, and I think people need to sort of get off this whole comparison of, Carney to Trudeau. I mean, they are, of the same party, but they're very different individuals. And I think their governing styles are going to be very different. And I think the teams that they've assembled around them, sort of reflect their own leadership styles and their own management styles. And, Mark Carney represents a different wing, I would say, of the Liberal Party. That's not a bad thing. That's not a good thing. It's just a neutral thing that is factually true. And so I think when you have somebody like Carney come in at a time of great economic uncertainty and, with a very strong minority mandate to move forward on some of his priorities, you're going to get a different speech. And I would say that the general underpinning of this speech, aside from the very perhaps not so inobvious, direct kind of jab at Trump and, the Trump administration more generally, a lot of it was about our, standing in the world and how we're going to shore up these sort of new alliances in the coming years and even coming months. Because if you got into some of the specifics, for example, there's a specific mention of aligning ourselves with Europe, right, for defense and for Arctic sovereignty purposes. And that's super interesting, given the fact that the G7 is 2 weeks away, and he's got a NATO meeting coming up in July, I believe. So that'll make for some interesting pull-asides and certainly for a lot of fodder in the next few weeks.
No kidding. This, by the way, G7, it's like a huge deal. I was through May long weekend in that region in Kananaskis where it's going to be, not exactly there, but it's unbelievable. Just even the security on this. Let me sidetrack us for a second. You and I are really good at sidetracking and getting back on track, but it's unreal. I was hearing from folks connected, I won't say who they're connected to, but credible people talking about how they've had U.S. Army Rangers and members of the Canadian military that have been in camo on the mountainsides hiking through for the past number of weeks, talking about the helicopter traffic that's out there. And in a remarkable bit of bullshit, can you believe this? This straight from former Banff National Park Superintendent Kevin Van Tegem. Did you know that they've had teams out there uprooting and clearing berry bushes to try to make it more safe or perceived to be more safe for visitors by getting the bears out of the area? They're literally eradicating food sources for bears in the areas around that Pomeroy Mountain Lodge. Can you believe it?
That seems kind of extreme.
Horrible.
I'm surprised there hasn't been more outcry over that.
Me too.
We love our bears.
I think I'm trying to kickstart it right now, as a matter of fact. This is probably exactly what I'm doing. And people are saying they couldn't have even just picked the berries. They had to eradicate the bushes. Anyway, I digress. Not the top story, unless you're a bear, in which case this is definitely leading the headlines. But the G7, go ahead.
Can I ask a dumb question? Just because I'm not really a super outdoorsy person, and I assume you've had much more, backwoods camping experience. Yeah. So, if you uproot their food source, won't they just go looking for it in more interesting places? If I know nothing about bears, other than what I've learned from Yogi Bear's cartoons, they're going to get closer and closer to humans to try and.
They're going to start dumpster diving.
Basket.
Exactly.
Yeah, dumpster diving. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. It seems just bonkers. Anyway, this will be our lead story in a future episode as we continue to advocate for Canadian wildlife. But all eyes on the world for the G7, right? Supriya, you've kind of had the finance ministers of these member nations already meeting, and then to have all the world leaders here. Obviously, a lot of people, this has been the talk over the last 18 months or so is the message that Canada will be sending to its fellow member nations, not just throughout this, but this throne speech, obviously huge opportunity while everybody's watching.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, to my earlier point, it was kind of like a polite way, of Carney telling the Trump administration to shove off, that we're our own GD country with our own history and our own traditions, as well as our own culture. And guess what? We'll get the only guy who loves gaudy gold more than you do, Trump, to make that point for us. So I think it was a real flex. And it was honestly a great day for the Carney government and for Canada. It's good to see our institutions still be strong. And the fact that, again, like I said, there were so many people who were, out and smiling and wanted to show their support. I think it's a good patriotic moment for us.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of as a matter of fact, I think I listened to the thing top to tail. I don't think I heard Donald Trump's name mentioned even once, which, I don't know if you're surprised that with the throne speech.
I don't think he would have mentioned him. That would have been weird, no?
Right, and I'm not sure the king wants to read that. The king doesn't want to step in, but he wasn't afraid. Like you said, hints, allegations, and things left unsaid. Here's more from King Charles III delivering the throne speech in Ottawa.
Today, Canada faces another critical moment. Democracy, pluralism, the rule of law, self-determination, and freedom are values which Canadians hold dear, and ones which the government is determined to protect. The system of open global trade that, while not perfect, has helped to deliver prosperity for Canadians for decades, is changing. Canada's relationships with partners are also changing.
Partnerships also changing. That's about as close as King Charles is going to get to directly chiming in on this.
It kind of sounds like what you would tell your kids if you were getting a divorce. It's like, kids, the partnership of me and your mom are changing now.
It's evolving.
Yeah, exactly. We still love you, though, but the partnership is changing. Look, I think to your point, yeah, I mean, he said it basically without saying it. I think that's as far as we're going to get with respect to the king kind of wading into this, as well as what I would expect, Prime Minister Carney himself to sort of keep up with, diplomatic language and not poke the president in the eye himself. But, I think it's clear that this is what we have to do. Trump represents now a huge shift. I think Prime Minister Carney's word for it was he's a transformational president, right? Which, Trump thankfully took as a compliment. But insofar as Canada really has to rethink our trade going forward, being so heavily dependent on the US, as well as military alliances. And again, irrespective of if one takes Trump's threats of annexation seriously, I think what Trump represents is a real break in what Canada could previously rely on and what the rest of the world could previously rely on in terms of like a rules-based international order, and like things would go the way that they have for quite some time. And Trump has completely upended that. And we've got to adapt or die.
Interesting. In our live chat powered by Park Power, Matthew is quoting, the true north is indeed strong and free. He says that gave me butterflies. What a beautiful and powerful line. I'm not sure if you saw the headline for Shannon Proudfoot's piece in the Globe this morning. King Charles delivers soaring poetry and gristly prose in the throne speech to a giddy Senate. This is like, people are, I guess, are really moved by this. How much of it did you think, like yourself as a top advisor, as an analyst, as somebody who's done a lot of writing themselves, how much of the speech do you think was aimed not necessarily at Pierre Poilievre, but the Liberals' attempt to sort of trying to create a contrast between their vision for Canada and the Conservatives?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. To be honest, I don't know if this speech would have been, if Pierre would have even been the focus or the Conservatives would have been the focus. I think quite honestly, what this speech sort of reflected is a truncated version. And I don't mean that pejoratively. I just mean because of time constraints, a truncated version of what the Carney Liberals would have presented throughout the campaign. There wasn't a ton of deviation. And we might get into this later, but in terms of what the Conservative opposition reaction was, I mean, it didn't really seem to be like the main criticism that Poilievre had wasn't about the content of the speech necessarily itself, that there were specific things that they vehemently disagreed with. It was more about the generalness, I guess, or that the speech didn't really delve into very specific plans. But of course, that's not really what a throne speech is or what it's supposed to be for. It's supposed to be laying out general priorities. And I think, we got that with what King Charles delivered.
Mr. Poilievre tweeting yesterday, restoring the country's promise takes a plan to repeal anti-energy laws, obviously talking C-69, to greenlight pipelines, to cut government waste and taxes, and to lock up offenders to keep Canada safe. He says, we have that plan. I was at the Edmonton Real Estate Forum yesterday, moderating a chat with Sean Speer, the conservative commentator, and he was quite struck, I think, by Energy Minister Tim Hodgson's comments in Calgary. I'm not sure if you saw them, but basically the federal energy minister saying we need pipelines, we need access to tidewater, basically talking about, to a crowd in Calgary about how Alberta needs to factor into Canada's energy future, which I think probably calmed the waters a little bit, albeit all talk right now. People want to see action. What do you make on that front? Poilievre talking about anti-energy laws, greenlighting pipelines. What tone do you pick up from the Carney government early?
Yeah, sure. And I think that's exactly what the Conservatives should be doing, right? Like, knock Carney and the government over the head as much as you can with very specific legislative pieces or very specific policy fixes that the Conservatives believe should be getting done. But I think in terms of the shift from Minister Hodgson, it's quite clear that it's a bit of a departure from the last 10 years under the previous Liberal government. But to your point about it calming the waters a little bit and it being all talk, they're also setting the bar for themselves quite high. So if for whatever reason some of these projects can't get built or can't be, or certain ideas perhaps can't be actioned into actual tangible things, you're going to run into quite a few disappointed people, and rightfully so. And Carney's, say what you will about him, he's extremely intelligent. He's the kind of guy who's looking, if he's playing chess, he's like 2 or 3 moves ahead. So I can't imagine they don't actually have a plan. And I would just, tell folks that are anxious that it is only the first week of Parliament being back. It's not even the end of the week. We're Wednesday. The throne speech was yesterday. Give them some time. Caucus is meeting today, as I understand it, as all the caucuses are, and just wait until they get into the rhythm of things, and we'll start to see things move, I'd imagine. Yeah,
Mackenzie Gray, Global reporting. He had asked the PMO about the Prime Minister's promise. You remember this on acceptance speech. This was April 28th, the night of April 28th, says when he asked the PMO about his promise for free trade in Canada by Canada Day, which I sort of described as like one of the most sleeper lines of all time in any speech, basically eliminating inter-provincial trade barriers, over the course of 2.5, 3 months. Gray reporting they confirmed, the PMO did, the intent is to introduce, not pass, trade legislation by Canada Day. Says that the platform only promised to bring forward legislation by July 1st. I don't know that this is a bombshell, because it would have been virtually impossible. It would have been probably one of the most remarkable political feats, maybe aside from what Carney already accomplished in April. But what are you expecting to see on that front? Because this opens up, it's a very positive development. We're about to talk to the president and CEO of Alberta Chambers of Commerce. I know this is something they're really keen to talk about for sure. But you're negotiating with so many different premiers, so many different regional interests, and obviously so many different challenges. What do you expect to see from the Liberal government in that bridge building there, province to province, over the next number of months?
Yeah, it'll be really interesting because there are quite a few different personalities right around that first minister's table. He's going to have to get into it with various ministers. But the other thing I would just say that stands out to me about this is that, interprovincial trade barriers do cost the country quite a bit. It's something like 4% of our real GDP per capita. So it's not like chump change that we're talking about here. And these barriers kind of range, right? There are different health and safety standards or regulations and inspection obligations when it comes to products or ingredients that go into a product. So there's all of that, and that we should obviously get rid of. But there's also the aspect of different professions such as, like teaching or nursing. They're all regulated provincially via the provinces and via their own provincial regulators. So if you're talking about the movement of people, like if as part of this removal of trade barriers or this one Canadian economy that has also, continually been said with this government, we're going to have to also let the provinces do their own thing to remove some of this, because not all of it is within the federal government's remit. And we're going to have the provinces fully come to the table to want to remove some of the barriers that are within their own jurisdictions. And, I know Manitoba and Ontario, for example, it was a couple of weeks ago, I think, signed this memorandum of understanding when it comes to a free trade deal between the two of them. And it's like, okay, but let's see it in action.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the next few months will be very interesting. Obviously, as this is now it gets to the point where there's there's been a lot of talk and a lot of rhetoric. Not a bad thing. That's the initial response, the elbows up campaign. Canadians pushing back on the 51st state stuff. Obviously, I'm going to ask you about the Golden Dome post by the President of the United States in just a quick second. But I know that Canadians, in particular, people doing business, are eager to see that start to happen. That free flow east to west, I think. More frequently. We're hanging out with Supriya Dwivedi, more in just a second, including Trump's pitch for Canada's participation in a missile defense system. And also, of course, we want to get into polling on how Canadians do feel about the monarchy. We'll give you Canadians writ large and then take a look at how conservatives feel about it. Some interesting results there. First, I'm very excited to let you know, and I want to say a huge thank you, Real Talkers, to everybody that helped us sell out the 4th annual Real Talk Golf Classic. It's set to go Thursday, June 19th at the Ranch Golf and Country Club in support of the Real Talk Julie Rohr Scholarship. Friends, we stretched the limits. We're going to be welcoming 152 golfers. It's going to be a packed field with 4 different shots at a $100,000 hole-in-one. You're not going to want to miss it. That is June 19th at the Ranch Golf and Country Club. Thanks to everybody who registered, our volunteers, our sponsors. The Ranch does more golf tournaments than any other course in the province of Alberta. That means they're the best at it. They've got a team that can help you through the menu decisions, the merch decisions. They'll help you maximize your fundraising and your fun. That's right, the Ranch, online at theranchgolf.com. Make sure you let them know that Real Talk sent you, will ya? Our friends at Friesen Brothers celebrating 70 years this year. 1955 is the year that Frank Loveson opened up that independent butcher shop in beautiful Hinton, the gateway to Jasper National Park. 16 locations now across the province, still family owned. A truly, truly remarkable Alberta success story. Friesen Brothers Garden Centers are home right now. They're wide open and ready for you, and it's after May long weekend, so you can feel good putting your garden in, friends. One of the cool things that Friesen Brothers makes sure of, more than half of the plants you're going to find in those garden centers are grown right here in Alberta. They're a perfect fit for our unique climate. That includes the peat moss, too. You can learn more about their garden center programs by checking out their website or visit them in store. Friesen Brothers is Alberta grown and Alberta owned. And we're very proud to be supporting our friends at UCAN Youth Services, working with vulnerable or at-risk young people aged 12 to 24. They host these open houses every once in a while, and they've got one coming up this Thursday. That's right, that's Thursday, the 29th of May. They're going to buy you lunch. You have a chance to swing on by UCAN HQ, check out the programs, meet some of the young people, and understand how what they're doing truly is transformational. It's free to attend, but you got to register at info@ucan.ca. We'll put that in the show notes, info@ucan.ca. It's UCAN 101, a luncheon from noon to 1 on the 29th of May. Again, info@ucan.ca. Supriya Dwivedi, our guest, a longtime political commentator. You read her work, of course, in Canada's major papers. You see her on the national broadcast, and of course, has always been a wonderful friend to this show. The President of the United States has not backed off at all of his 51st state rhetoric. You thought it was kind of starting to settle. Once Carney and his cabinet had sworn in, we hadn't heard much from the President of the United States, but this post, on the day that the throne speech is being read by the King, Trump says, "I told Canada," which very much wants to be part of our fabulous Golden Dome system, that it will cost $61 billion if they remain a separate but unequal nation, but will cost $0 if they become our cherished 51st state. They are considering the offer. Well, we know for a fact that nobody's considering the offer, but what do you think is the strategy behind the post, if there is one?
There isn't any, and this is what we have to stop looking for. There's no strategy, there's no rhyme or reason, there's no logic, there's none of it. He's just a dude who flies by the seat of his pants and posts whatever the fuck he wants to post whenever he wants to post it, right? Like this notion that there's some sort of way to be able to be a Trump whisperer or to, some other iteration of the right assembly of people will somehow be able to wrangle him and to control him, and I'm putting that in air quotes, is just BS. The fact of the matter is that he has like 3 or 4 constant refrains that he tends to go back to, and 51st state rhetoric in this iteration of Trump is one of those things. I would expect him to keep doing it, and I would expect, Prime Minister Carney and his team to keep doing what they're doing, which is to keep their heads down and to just do the work and to not do anything to, overtly upset the president. But I mean, they also, are standing their ground, and Carney himself, I think, at least in that, you're showing a picture of their meeting in the Oval Office in the White House, has shown that he can handle Trump quite adeptly when needed.
I'm not asking you to try to understand the man,
Sure.
but I think that you're doing a good job of providing a straight summary and analysis of what's going on. But what about when it's happening? Like the two most significant comments he's made about Canada, both of them, they're disparaging, regardless of how they're packaged. A separate but unequal nation. Who says that? But one was on election day, and this is on the throne speech. Does this do a favor to the Liberal government? Does this hurt the Conservatives in any way? Does it have any real impact aside from people like us chuckling about it?
That's a good question. Look, I think the Conservatives, if they were smart, which they don't seem to be right now, would be channeling this in a way to attack the government, and by showing, by using that and any other, forthcoming posts that Trump, or forthcoming comments that Trump makes about Canada being a 51st state, or about musing about annexation, or about not respecting, our government or our country or our sovereignty, I think should be met with the Conservatives being like, see, this is like, nobody can control Trump. He's a wild card. This is what we can do in terms of making Canada, an even better country than it is already, and improving on like XYZ. And then, Poilievre can line into his top 2 or 4 whatever priorities, and shortly explaining how he's going to get there. But they're not doing that. They didn't do that during the campaign, and I thought that was very weird that they didn't do that. And you certainly saw a bit of a toned down Poilievre at the mic yesterday when he was giving his reaction to the throne speech. He wasn't as didn't seem as arrogant or as smug, answered the questions without being overly, quite frankly, dickish to the journalists that were asking the questions. But unless they can really harness this into an attack on the government, in order to boost themselves as the more, credible governing party for Canada, I think all it does is provide a bit of fodder, to your point, Ryan, for folks like us, or for the panel shows that happen on the major broadcast networks. But I mean, like, it's very hard to actually delve into this in any sort of substantive way, because Trump himself has very little substance. And aside from, these posts that we get, he could say something again tomorrow or next week that'll be in opposition to that. And then he'll go back on that in another week. Like,
it's just like the power that it has to move markets, the power that it has to influence billions or trillions of dollars of trade over a period of time. It's just like, I guess I'm just, it's taking some getting used to try to train myself to disregard things that are said about our nation by the most powerful person on planet Earth.
Yeah. And look, in fairness, I don't think folks should disregard it completely, right? I mean, he is saying things. He is the president of the United States. His words do matter. And I'm not faulting journalists or, the panel folks for talking about this sort of stuff. Like, what else are they going to talk about? It's news, and it's newsworthy, and we have to talk about it. But I think, to your point about it being market moving, I mean, it'd be really nice if the markets at this point kind of learn that a lot of the time his rhetoric is just that. But I don't expect that to really happen. And I don't think we can really expect that to happen. It's just a real unfortunate reality that the US, has gave him another mandate. And here we are, the rest of the world, like all at the mercy of whatever the heck he chooses to post at whatever hour from his phone.
I'm just surprised he didn't save the name Golden Dome for his new shampoo that'll come out on QVS in October of 2029. Don't you think the Golden Dome, as hawked by Trump, right? When the steak business failed, the shampoo business comes up. Get your bottle of the Golden Dome by Donald Trump. Hey, Jillian in our live chat, powered by Park Power, says it's wild how stable the Commonwealth has been. She says, I agree 100%. I don't care about the monarchy, just like Supriya, she says, but there's no doubt that the United States is a failed or failing experiment. She says Boston should have just paid the tea tax. I like that. She's got away with words. Yeah, some pretty interesting polling. Let's take a look, though. This is updated numbers on how Canadians across the country feel about Canada's relationship with the monarchy. And maybe some people will be surprised, and maybe they won't. But as we take a look here regionally, 30%, 1 in 3 Canadians supports the constitutional monarchy, reportedly about the same number of Albertans that do not support Alberta's relationship to the country. Let me just throw that in there. 1 in 3. About a quarter, 24% say they're not sure. And 46% across the country say they do not support the constitutional monarchy. Support is the lowest by a large margin in Quebec, where 14% support, 60% oppose. Alberta, 30% support, about the national average, by the way. Alberta pretty much bang on the national average. 50% do not support. Most supportive, I guess you'd argue, Ontario, 37%, followed by the Atlantic provinces and Manitoba. Anything particularly interesting there for you? 1 in 3. I maybe would have expected it to be a little higher, but I guess you have, I don't know.
That would have been my initial reaction. I'm wondering how the question was phrased, because again, like, to be honest, like if I was asked a question by a pollster, like, do I support the constitutional monarchy? I would say yes, because of, everything we just talked about in terms of the stability that it represents, and it being, in my view, a better political system than a presidential system like what they have in the States or in very many other countries. But if I was asked, like, do I support the monarchy, period, like, question mark without like the constitutional in front of it, my answer would probably be no. Even though with all the reasons I said before, like, I do think it's a better system, but do I support, I don't know, like the family and and the symbolism of what it represents, of like, having an elevated aristocracy above everybody else? Like, no, probably not. But one thing that I do find really interesting, and you and I have talked about this quite a bit over the years, I really like the Alberta-Quebec overlap. It's like Quebecers that are like meh with the monarchy, and then Alberta's right there second. We have a lot more in common than I think we give ourselves credit for.
Yeah, you know what? Like, there's kind of something happening here. And I can be your reporter on the ground. I can be your correspondent from this wonderful prairie province. And I don't speak on behalf of all 5 million people, but I can tell you that people are starting to admit that, for example, Mr. Blanchette has kind of found a strange place in their hearts. And when he speaks, although he takes little jabs at Alberta, like he recently did, saying, for example, that oil and gas is not a culture, didn't land well with Alberta's premier. She commented on it on this show and the like. We also understand there's a little bit of ribbing that might be, and if I use this metaphor, people are going to flip, but almost like an older sibling, younger sibling kind of thing. And more Albertans are acknowledging, although I grew up in an era through the early to mid 1980s where there were many disparaging bumper stickers about Quebec, now people acknowledge that maybe Alberta could learn a thing or two from Quebec. And now there's starting to be a bit more, I'm not saying a dramatic overhaul, but maybe a bit more of an open-mindedness about paying close attention to what's worked over there for them, what might work in Alberta. Apples and oranges, or do you think it could happen? Could Alberta follow the model?
I think it's a little apples and oranges. But I think, if the goal, I guess, is to have a successful separatist movement, then sure, they could probably learn a thing or two from the Quebec separatist movement. I would just say, though, it's at least from my perspective, and I don't discount the fact that there's a lot of, ambivalence and even feelings of hurt towards the federal government in Alberta. I'm not denying any of that. But I think the environment in which folks are getting their information and the way people can perhaps be, manipulated through their algorithmic feeds and what they're being fed with, I think that alone makes it a very apples to oranges comparison, especially if you look at the information environment that the last Quebec referendum would have had, which was in 1995, right? Like people didn't have the internet then, and certainly weren't scrolling through YouTube shorts or TikTok or whatever that was just going to reinforce whatever position that they already sort of hold, and slowly drifting them into more and more extreme positions.
Yeah, I promise I'm only going to keep you 4 more minutes because I want to have a heart out and respect it every time we ask for you. But there are a lot of rumblings that the Parti Québécois could do really well in the next provincial election there, and that could mean another referendum in Quebec as well. Wouldn't it be fascinating and somewhat troubling to see 2 provinces holding referendums within a year of each other on their future in Canada? Could like alter the vibe significantly coast to coast. Agreed?
It 100%. And it also makes Canada a huge target for foreign interference, more so than we already are, right? Yeah. Like you have 2 separate provinces that have, legitimate grievances and want to separate. That's rife for manipulation in terms of having a foreign hostile actor come in and try and amplify some of those divisions and amplify the polarization. So I think folks should be very, careful about what they're consuming online. And if you see a bunch of accounts that are new, that are, propagating one message or another, you should sort of think twice about it. I mean, like the one account that is popping into my head, there's some like Albertans, like Republican Albertans or something like that.
Oh man, the Alberta Republican Party, yeah.
Yeah, and you're just like, what? Are you real? Like, I don't believe they're, like, I refuse to believe they're actually Canadian, just out of, like, the things that they say.
Yeah, I mean, I was saying a lot of these people, and obviously you can't say 100% in either group, but a lot of these Alberta Republicans that are now flying the maple leaf upside down, flying the stars and stripes, talking about the 51st state in a positive, welcoming kind of a context, are the same ones that were wrapping themselves in the flag during the truck convoy and the Ottawa occupation. It's just diluted and watered down whatever message they were trying to send to the country before. And I think it's an embarrassment now. I will say this, the greatest disservice to any Alberta Republican movement is the people that are currently speaking on its behalf. And if they continue to issue statements like they are recently, words ending in "tard," for example, Supriya, then I don't think that this party is going to get off the ground. That's not to poo-poo what's happening here. And I will say any population that has 30% of its members feeling a certain way should not be discounted, and that's why we're not discounting it on this show. For what it's worth, here's what like decided voters or political party members told pollsters about Canada's relationship with the constitutional monarchy. No surprise, Bloc Québécois supporters, 10% are in support of the current relationship, 72% oppose. Less or on the enthusiasm ladder, we then find the NDP at 23% support, 43% oppose. Then Conservatives, 1 in 3 support it, 30%, 52% oppose. And then of stated Liberal supporters, nearly 40% support, 35% oppose. I think that's probably where you would predict if you were going to be listing them 1 to 4. Is that where you'd put it?
No, I don't know. Am I off? Like, I would have thought the polling for the Conservatives would have been higher. In terms of their support. Like, I don't know. That
you seems just older like, voters? Why?
Maybe, yeah, I don't know. I just, if you're conservative, you hold on to tradition and values, and you don't want
they used to
change.
They used to.
Yeah.
Conservatives used to be. This is what Jen Gerson actually had a great piece on this a couple of weeks ago, I guess it would have been now. But she talked a lot about how conservatives used to be the champions and the protectors of institutions and traditions, and they're just not anymore. And she wrote it in the context of what Danielle Smith's doing right now with the UCP. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, no surprise with the Bloc. I think within, and again, I'm just like painting with big, wide brushes here, but I think NDP supporters might not like the opulence of the idea. I don't know. Maybe that's it. right? And then, yeah, conservatives and liberals, I'm not sure. They're not that far apart, 10 points, which isn't nothing. Hey, before we let you go, I got to ask you about this. Don't roll your eyes, but this video clip was making the rounds earlier in the week. You have the Prime Minister in the House, and he appears to be prepping for a meeting, appears to be maybe reviewing his notes, and Mélanie Joly comes over to him. She's kind of like twirling a necklace or something, or a pendant, kind of like passing the time, and then she pops over to the Prime Minister, whether it's to offer a thought or to ask him a question. Here she is. She stands up. She leans in, and then the Prime Minister kind of waves his hand, and then she leaves. People are saying that he kind of shushed her or kind of shooed her away from the desk, albeit all conservative accounts. What do you make of the interaction?
This is the most important thing that's happening in politics.
I saved it
right
for the
now.
last. I saved it for the very last.
Look, I mean, we can go look, I saw that video. I saw it being promoted by conservative accounts. I saw the narrative that they're trying to run with, that he's like, oh, he's so sexist and misogynistic, and he's dismissing Minister Joly away. I mean, okay, like, to me, it just kind of looks like they're passing the time. The Prime Minister is clearly reading something. We can't see his face, first of all, at all in the video. From my vantage point, it looks like she went to say something to him. He held up his hand to signal that he's reading, probably said, I'm reading. And then she went back to her seat to do exactly what she was doing beforehand. And I mean, anybody who's been around Minister Joly knows she's not exactly someone who is, easily dismissed or to be waved away. And the fact that she didn't look miffed when she sat back down and again went to do exactly what she's doing, I don't know, that signals to me that it was just two colleagues colleaguing. Like, it wasn't anything more than that.
Johnny and I were like breaking this down like you do.
Yeah.
You remember like back when everybody thought Marty Jelena scored on Nikolai Habibulin for the Flames to win the 04 Cup, Supriya, and they would wind back and they would go frame by frame by frame by frame by frame. Johnny and I were doing that yesterday. Yeah. We both decided though we need the head-on shot. Like, yeah. I need to see Carney's face, but I can't imagine he would go like you know what I mean?
No. Yeah. And but to your point, yes, the Carney head-on shot is what we need. That's the real, was there a second shooter?
That would be from Pierre Poilievre. The Zapruder film, straight from Pierre's mobile phone.
Except he can't be in there.
Yeah, that's right. He can't be in there. How bizarre is that? Not yet.
I was trying to zoom in on the video because you can clearly see when he first does it that she laughs. Like, she sits down and she's kind of laughing. But I mean, when I saw this video, I'm like, I think like the same thing happens in the office with you and me. When you're working, you're like, okay, I got to focus here. I'm distracted, Johnny. Like, you've shooed me away harder.
But not like,
but like, I don't think it was like disrespectful in any way. But I could see how from a back angle on a silent video that you could kind of pull anything, right?
Yeah, no kidding. Speaking of the Battle River Crowfoot by-election, the Prime Minister's promised that it'll happen soon. Pierre Poilievre will find his way into the House in one of the safest conservative ridings of all time. In closing, final question, I promise. Do you think this is also one of the most conservative ridings in the province of Alberta, in that region? And so when it comes to thoughts on separatism, again, let me state clearly, I do not speak for all of the residents or the voters in Battle River Crowfoot. But if this proves to be one of the loudest jurisdictions for Alberta sovereignty or Alberta separation, and it also happens to be the riding of the leader of the official opposition, Pierre Poilievre, it puts him in a bit of a tough spot, no?
Yeah, he's kind of cooked. Yeah. Like, I don't do you represent your constituents or do you represent the interests of your national party, right? And your own aspirations to be prime minister of the entire country, not just to, govern a 51st state Alberta or whatever it is. Yeah. So, it's interesting that they would have chosen that riding. I get why, in terms of the safety of the seat for a conservative, candidate. But it just seems like they're going to step into a minefield that should have and very well could have been avoided. And he's not going to be able to avoid it anymore.
It's always so fun connecting with you. We always value your time and your perspective, Supriya. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks, Ryan.
You got it. Follow Supriya Dwivedi on X. Follow her on Instagram. A fair point from Vamp Fashions in our live chat, powered by Park Power, who says, are you Real talk, boys? Really sure? You want to start throwing bombs about the Golden Dome? I'm sorry, I've put you in a tough spot with your Oilers playoffs quaff.
I could throw some bombs about Van Fashions if we want on the show. We could go tit for tat if you want.
Aren't the Oilers something like 11-1 since you dyed your hair?
Bro, this hair is just this is the yellow brick road, baby. Straight to the Stanley Cup.
I love it.
I mean, it's been working.
No, it has been. Don't you?
I
so
single-handedly
can I
turned
share?
Stuart Skinner's mental fluidity, like his strength mentally,
you
physically.
had no idea at the time.
It's coming from this head.
The power of what you were about to do.
I had no idea.
The yellow brick road.
Now, if only I could harness this for good and change the world.
Lori says to us, Jespo, please don't let the bear story die. I promise I won't. I promise I won't, but I also want to get to something here because I have done an update. And like, if we're going to be fair, you guys, the show is always going to be fair and accurate, right? And we're going to update stories as we can in order that none of us look like buffoons as we're speaking to people that we know. And so let me check. There is an update. There's an updated post from Kevin Van Tighem. You know him. He's the author. He's been on the show many times. The author of like 25 books, former superintendent of Banff National Park. He says, I finally heard this, an update on the 26th of May, says, I finally heard from somebody directly connected to the Buffalo Berry bush removal project. And he says, and it's not what the media has been reporting. He says, here's what my invisible friend had to say. Quote, I'm not an authorized spokesperson, just somebody helping out some days. So this is boots on the ground. In a nutshell, Buffalo Berry is being removed around the developed footprint of Kananaskis Village. Previously done in 2009-2010, so about 15 years ago, next to the hotel, restaurants, tennis courts, parking lots, and staff residences, not on trails or backcountry areas, says the source. As with all vegetation management projects, there's a long-term goal. They're trying to keep the berry population in the village low, hopefully for many years. And they've got students and scouts out as part of this G7-sponsored event, describing the CBC coverage of this as odd. So there you have it.
There you go.
But Supriya makes a good point, and she discloses, she's not a wildlife management specialist. None of us are, but it does seem to make sense that at a time of year when, the bears have been out for a while, but this is when they're loading up, man. This is when they're hungry. This is when they're out. This is when they're seeking sources of food. Any effort to remove food sources from wildlife is going to be met with consternation. Kevin, by the way, goes on to talk about how in a rare blast aimed at Peter Lougheed, you got to pick your spots when you're picking on Peter Lougheed. But he does say that the Kananaskis Valley, he says, for all the positive things that Lougheed did, choosing the most important mosaic of critical wildlife habitat in the Kananaskis Valley for that resort and golf course was an incredibly bad decision.
Yeah, I agree. I don't like placing these opulent, inaccessible places, and that, like if you're gonna place stuff like that, like make it some accessible public place. Like, I don't even like when they make things I love national parks, but it just drives all the people to that place, right? Which
but in
is
a protected context,
yeah,
right?
of course.
So that I think is the argument when you look at national park development. This is, we've talked a lot about Jasper. We're about to take you to Jasper in a second here about the impact of the redevelopment or the rebuild after that fire, and the unique nature of reconstructing or rebuilding in a national park. This, of course, a provincial park, the Kananaskis Park, but kind of interesting, and I do think it's a story that's flying under the radar for most members of the general public, right?
I think a whole show should be dedicated to these bears, and why not let them get a little close? I'd love to see all the bears in a line in front of the politicians and the leaders.
Why not
maybe growling and
it could be
the most Canadian thing ever.
When you go diving and they put you down in the shark cage, and then they chum the waters, and then the great whites come and swim right by you.
Any leader that gets in a tussle with a Canadian bear is gonna make the news, the media.
Did you see the post on Instagram a while ago? This happened at a dive resort. I don't remember what country it had. I think
the girl got her head bit. Yeah.
Well, the shark breached the cage. It jumped into the cage. Like it was a total. I don't know if it was an accident.
I think we're talking about two different things.
Yeah, so this shark, like these shark cages, any diver will know there's not a top on a lot of them. Right? Because they just lower you down, but there's no top because the top is above the water. The shark breached and went into the cage.
Wow. Or sometimes they do it inverse where like there's no bottom so the swimmer can get out, but those things are crazy. But I also saw another video, I'm sure everyone knows this one, where they're at a resort and they have like mermaid, like specialized divers dressed as mermaids, and they swim around with like fish. And one of them is a shark, but apparently it's not like hostile. But she started swimming up, and it literally bit her head, and she had like.
Is she okay?
She's fine,
okay.
But it was just kind of like a get away from me.
You know what happened is the shark woke up and realized it was a shark.
I think the shark was like, "Why am I in this, small glass bowl with this person? Let me out of here." But
Ms. B says constitutional monarchies, no matter how I personally feel about them, are proven to be the most stable and resilient type of democracy over time. Interesting. I'm going to wager a guess that regardless of what polling says about how Canadians feel about Canada's relationship with the monarchy, this is not the time. Now is not the time to look to break off any ties outside of this economic relationship with the United States. If you're looking for stability right now, blowing up the relationship with the monarchy is probably not priority number one.
No, I think I'm glad we dedicated a show to it because we had to talk about it. But I think for Canadians, it's a non-issue. There's so much other stuff on their mind right now.
Yeah.
Ryan.
Steve Fetter, great to see you, Fets, in the chat, says this guest, Supriya, is clearly anti-Conservative Party of Canada.
Well,
I mean, hey, she wears her heart on her sleeve, and in so many ways, and we've said this before on the show, and I know Fetter's been around for a long time and has heard Conservative and Liberal guests. He's heard a lot of guests from across the spectrum. Sometimes guests, the context will, exactly where they're coming from, right? She was a senior advisor to Justin Trudeau. There you go. Just in so many ways as Sean Speer was a senior advisor to Stephen Harper, who was on the show with us just a while ago. Keep the comments coming. Fetter, I saw your comments on Canada getting up to speed on military spending. That's obviously a story that we're keeping an eye on as well, as Canada looks to meet its promises to NATO of at minimum 2% GDP. When we talked to Sean Speer, he was talking about the implications of getting that up to 5% over time, which would obviously be a dramatic increase in military spending. We're going to get right back to the throne speech. We're going to talk about the Alberta cabinet shuffle. I want to talk about the elimination of those inter-provincial trade barriers and so much more. Shauna Feth, president and CEO of the Alberta Chambers of Commerce, has her eye on Alberta business. That coming up in just a moment. But first, every week, courtesy of our friends at Tourism Jasper, we have a chance to take you out to beautiful Jasper National Park and remind you of the memories that lie in wait as you and your family get set to head out there and visit the mountains. There is no experience quite like the Maligne Lake Boat Cruise. This is one that our family absolutely loves, and they are now open for the season. This is an opportunity for you to see one of the most beautiful vantage points in Canada's national park network. Absolutely stunning landscapes, including beautiful Spirit Island. Thousands and thousands of years of history there. This is your chance to discover or maybe rediscover Spirit Island. This is one of Canada's most photographed locations and certainly one of the most iconic landmarks in the country. The Maligne Lake Boat Cruise has been declared the best boat cruise in Canada by 8 million Reader's Digest subscribers, and it's an experience like no other. You'll step onto the guided boat. Those professionals that manage these cruises have a depth of knowledge that impressed all of us, and the ability to communicate it. Like I said, thousands and thousands and thousands of years of Indigenous history. And then, of course, over the more recent years, as Jasper National Park has welcomed visitors from around the world, these interpretive tours pause for a moment as you arrive near Spirit Island and have an opportunity to walk along those trails. And then it's back on the water as they make their way back. This is a wonderful opportunity for visitors and for folks that have called Canada home for many, many years. I will say, though, that the tours do fill up fast. So you're going to want to make sure that you book ahead and save. I'll never forget the times that we've had here as a family, and certainly we will be back this summer. We're excited to visit Jasper. I invite you, if you're taking your family out to Jasper National Park and you're going to be sharing your Jasper memories, to please share them with us. We'd love to feature them on an upcoming episode of Real Talk. You can hashtag MyJasper and Real Talk RJ on Instagram, on X, or tag us in your Facebook photos, and we'd love to share them here on the show. MyJasper Memories is proudly presented on Real Talk by our friends at Tourism Jasper. Well, once a month, Courtesy of our friends at the Alberta Chambers of Commerce, we're lucky enough to sit down with somebody who cares very deeply and has her finger on the pulse of where Alberta business is at. She's the president and CEO of the Alberta Chambers of Commerce, Shauna Feth. It's nice to see you.
Yeah, you as well, Ryan.
I wanted to make sure that we had you in here on the heels of the throne speech, and there's a lot happening provincially as well, which we'll get into. But what particularly jumped out at you as we heard from King Charles III reading that speech from the throne, outlining the Liberal government's priorities?
I think it sends some really positive messages to Alberta in terms of looking at cutting red tape and getting major projects moving again, which are things that we've been calling on for years with the government, with the Canadian government. The commitment to shorten project timelines from 5 years to 2 years, the approval process, and to go to that one project, one review, one approval process. That's critical when you talk about investment into the country. It gives some sustainability and some, optimism for investors that we can get projects moving, because that's always been a barrier. Not always, but we've historically had a barrier here to try and get major infrastructure projects moving forward. The talk about Canada being a global energy superpower, also very positive, because it wasn't just about new technologies, green energy, it was about conventional energy too, which sends a really strong message, again, to investors and into the energy sector. The commitment to keep spending under 2%. Obviously, Chambers, we're all about fiscal responsibility from our governments. So that was also incredibly positive to hear. So I think, all of that, if these promises come into being, if they turn into action, I think that's going to be incredibly positive for Alberta.
We were talking to Supriya a little bit about Mackenzie Gray's report on Global about, talking to the PMO about this promise, free trade across the country by Canada Day. We talked to you shortly after the federal election about that, and you had given us a really clear understanding about the value of that initiative. The government says it'll introduce legislation by Canada Day, but wheels are in motion. Are your members optimistic?
Absolutely. And I mean, we've talked about this previously, Ryan, but as a coalition of chamber leaders, we've been working together with the First Ministers. We presented to Premier Ford back in March on the importance of free trade within the country. And, at that time, and we're still talking about tariffs, maybe not to the same extent, but at that time, the offset to the hit to GDP that we would have had with tariffs could have been eliminated with free trade amongst our own provinces. So I can't state that enough, how critically important that is. So it was really positive to hear him talking about that as well.
Do you see Alberta taking a leadership role in that?
Absolutely. I think we already have. Alberta, back in 2019, it was actually at a Canadian Chamber conference out in Charlottetown, PEI. Then Premier Carney came and announced the removal of 19 out of 25 internal trade barriers. So Canada has been taking a lead on this. The Labour Mobility Act is another example of how we're taking a lead in terms of really understanding the importance of being able to trade with our partners across Canada, not just internationally. International markets obviously critically important, but if we could do better amongst ourselves as provinces, we would have much greater impact.
On the campaign trail ahead of the election, both the Conservatives and the Liberals were talking a lot about energy corridors. I'd be curious, I've not asked you about this. What do you think are like big vision? How do you see it? And what do you think are the key benefits to something like that?
Well, energy corridors, when we talk about them, a lot of times it just gets boiled down to, resources, to energy resources. But those corridors actually can contain a lot of the things that we are going to need going forward as a country in terms of, it could be fiber optics that is in there. It could be electricity. It could be all of the things that we need across the nation to continue to grow and develop as we are and at the rate that we are. And so I think that's really important to very much about getting our resources to market. Absolutely, we need to do that. And our resources, let's face it, ours are the cleanest that can be produced in the world, and we need to be getting those out to all of those markets that are scrambling and asking us for them, and we're not able to deliver.
Obviously, as CEO of the Alberta Chambers, you're going to be sort of viewing these things through the lens of what attracts investment or what retains investment for that matter, how much of this is a de-risking element?
It absolutely is. And I've already said it, just the clear signal from Ottawa that, these projects are going to happen, in the throne speech, that is hugely impactful and positive in terms of investment into the country.
Do you see a reconciliation angle here for economic opportunity for First Nations communities that I think in many circumstances have laid it out very clearly that there's big interest in these types of partnerships?
Absolutely. And I mean that investment, that additional investment into those types of projects for Indigenous communities from Ottawa as well is another strong signal that we are really going to look at truth and reconciliation as part of the development of these corridors and as part of any of these new projects moving forward, which is, again, just so incredibly positive in terms of the relationships and the opportunities.
I've heard, and people can check out the work that you and your team do at abchamber.ca. And I've always sort of found like there's an element of optimism with the Alberta Chamber's messaging. I wanted to ask you about an economic or a unifying vision for the country. There's a lot of talk about division right now. We just spent some time talking about maybe parallel. What's the plural of referendum? Referenda? I think it is of a referenda type scenario where you got two provinces evaluating their future within the country. I'd prefer to focus in the context of economic development or economic opportunity under the unity angle. Can you see can you see a reality where that becomes maybe more prevalent or more prominent than it has been?
I do, and I think we're again not taking any position. I mean, this is talking about a potential legislation point that it's just talk at this point. So until anything concrete happens, we really don't have a point. I mean, we've talked about this before on other key critical issues that have been happening. But what we are doing is we're asking the businesses about it in terms of how they perceive the impact to their business. And that's really what we do. It's all about the policies that are developed grassroots with businesses in consultation. And it's all about the research and the ability for us to actually get the pulse of what businesses are experiencing on the ground. And I think, you were speaking about this earlier, but, you can't diminish that there is a sense of, alienism from Ottawa in Alberta, that there is a sense of, not getting our fair share or a fair shake. But I would say too that, we really want to take a look at the importance of how we can really impact the economy of Canada as a whole. And being an energy superpower, and now that Carney is sending that clear message that we are an energy superpower, it just identifies how important Alberta is in that whole equation and how we can really have a leading role as a province in how this shapes out, going forward for the country as a whole. And I think that's incredibly positive. And I think, I was at the B7 Summit in Ottawa a couple of weeks ago. You were talking about the G7 earlier, but there is a real sense amongst the business community that now is the time. It's, we've been talking about the importance of energy corridors, the importance of interprovincial trade, the importance of, being able to nearshore procurement and supply chains, like all the things that we've been talking about that are so critically important to Alberta businesses. Everybody is talking about them now, and they're a priority, and they came up on just about every single panel discussion at the B7. And so from that perspective, I think there's real opportunity, and I would, again, really, we're going to listen to our business community in the province to identify, how and where we can support moving Alberta forward in a united Canada.
I want to point out, by the way, that your team is conducting another one of these Alberta Perspective surveys, which I love, and we'll link to it in the show notes on the podcast and on YouTube so people can take part. But Alberta's business climate is changing, and the Alberta Chambers wants to know what should come next amid a new federal government, calls for Alberta autonomy, a shifting economy. Take us into it.
Yeah, so it's exactly what you said, Ryan. It's just we're really trying to, again, to my point, we use this data to really support our positioning and to support how we advocate to various levels of government on behalf of business, which is a big part of what we do at the Chamber. We've had a change in the federal government. We've had, challenges basically since we woke up on January 1st. We've been dealing with some sort of crisis or another, or some sort of statement or another that we really have to address. what this is doing is it's just taking it down to the macro level to actually get that input from our business community to really understand, how are you being impacted? How have the last 5 months impacted you in terms of, the conversations? How is it impacting investment into Alberta? We also put some questions on there about possible separation and how businesses perceive that potentially will, again, impact their business and what kind of, and just the perceived idea of separation, how is that going to impact investment, et cetera?
I think it's really important that you're asking that question, because I think for a lot of people, these aren't the factors that they're considering. A lot of people aren't thinking about what does even talk about separation do to business confidence, investor confidence, real estate values, and so many other factors. Hey, as we speak, as we're recording this episode, we've heard a report about 2 hours ago that it looks like the CUPW and Canada Post may be returning to the bargaining table. I think that to a certain degree, all Canadians are paying attention to the story. Could we see another postal strike? But in particular, people that are doing business could be impacted in a major way by this. We've seen disruptions in the supply chain from not just the Canada Post strike, but in other circumstances as well. What are your members doing to prepare, and where are your thoughts at on this?
Well, again, I think we've talked about, the port strikes that happened last year and how that disrupted. We talked about Canada Post previously. The thing for us in terms of our small medium businesses is that they are the ones that are impacted mostly. It's not big business that's really impacted in terms of these types of strikes, and especially a Canada Post strike, in terms of being able to get, messaging in order to get product out, all of those types of things. And I can't diminish enough how impactful that is in terms of the disruption that creates in the day-to-day operations of a small, medium enterprise. And it's simple things. I mean, we were just talking about your example earlier, in terms of, it's such a small thing to think about, but it's actually a major disruption in the normal operation of your business.
100%. We have, to peek behind the curtain, which I was sharing with you, we have members of our administrative and executive production team that work out of Calgary, that work out of Vancouver. And we do use Canada Post quite frequently for anything that can't be transferred electronically. We also ship our merch to Real Talkers, who, by the way, go to ryanjespersen.com/merch to get our Made in Canada merchandise. But these are, for us as a small business, a disruption in Canada Post. I don't want to have important documents stuck in limbo for 6 weeks while this happens. And we're a small fish in the ocean. In the perspectives of some small businesses or medium-sized businesses, this could mean almost a total shutdown, or at least a significant increase in cost.
Absolutely, because you have to look at alternative ways then of being able to ship your goods to market, and maybe not as cost effective. So it's, any disruption in our supply chains. I mean, this has been happening since COVID, right? We've been seeing this kind of layered impact on supply chains, and we really need to be cognizant of the fact as decision makers, as they're going to the table to negotiate, that this is not a minor impact. This is a major impact to business across the country.
Congratulations, by the way, on an op-ed that I know was widely read in the Edmonton Journal back in April. We'll link to it in the show notes. Your opinion piece, it's time for Canada to play to its economic strengths. Take us into it. Yeah, so it was really about, we need to stop apologizing. We need to stop apologizing about being an energy resource rich province and the economic impact that has for the entire country. And we really need to start talking about responsible resource development. We need to be talking about lowering emissions, but still being able to scale projects so that we can reach international markets and can export more effectively. And that's really what it was about. It's about, as a country, we need to be leveraging these assets strategically, these energy assets strategically, so that we can create that fiscal capacity, because we need that fiscal capacity to fund all of the other things that we need, like innovation, environmental goals, social programming, all of the things that come as a result of having a resource-rich country. The key to any compelling communication is understanding the audience. And you knew exactly what you were doing, leading off with the Four Nations face-off hockey metaphor. I love that. For people that haven't read it, you say, remember when Canada beat the U.S. in OT of the Four Nations face-off? You said it wasn't just about one game. It was about pride and teamwork and execution under pressure through the tournament. Hallmarks of a high-performing team. You ask, and I thought this was good. Now imagine if our national team lost to the Americans 10 years in a row. You say there'd be outrage, questions about coaching and prep and effort, demands for change. And you argue that Canada's been losing badly, and not just to the Americans. For the last 10 years, we've recorded the second worst economic growth per capita in the developed world. That's an inconvenient statistic for a lot of people, and it might be shocking or surprising to some.
Yeah, second lowest in the OECD countries, which, that speaks to, again, we've talked about this before. I feel like I may be repeating myself sometimes, but we have a real productivity lag in this country, and that needs to be addressed. And we need to do that through, as I said, we need to be able to fund innovation. We need to be thinking about how do we mobilize things like AI and technology to better resource industries like manufacturing, production, et cetera. And, that's really what it was about. And we were just talking about this yesterday, but I'm going to draw another hockey parallel because right now, Alberta, the Oilers, are the only ones left in the Stanley Cup from Canada, representing Canada yet again. So I'm really excited about that too, and the fact that, fingers are crossed and we're rooting for our home team.
Johnny and I are taking every opportunity we can to remind everyone that the Vancouver Canucks and the Toronto Maple Leafs are both out on the outside looking in. What can we do? I want to ask you about this cabinet shuffle more locally in the province of Alberta before we go a major shuffle, in particular to the healthcare roles, as the Premier shuffles her cabinet to basically reassign the former health minister, Adriana LaGrange, now to one of four kind of, you might call them like pillar ministries, as they've rejigged basically the entire service delivery model. Minister LaGrange, now Minister of Primary and Preventative Health Services. Matt Jones, now Minister of Hospital and Surgical Health Services. These are all new ministries. They won't sound familiar to people that are used to the sort of the traditional models. Rick Wilson moving from Indigenous Relations to Minister of Mental Health and Addictions, which was Dan Williams. Jason Nixon, now the Minister of Assisted Living and Social Services, reflecting his expanded health portfolio. And then you've also got some other changes. Rajan Sani moving from advanced education to Indigenous Relations. Miles McDougall off the backbench, taking on Minister Sani's former role, and Dan Williams moving to Municipal Affairs, a pretty hefty portfolio from mental health and addiction. Joseph Scow moving to Jobs Minister, and Andrew Boychenko moving in to replace Scow in Minister of Tourism and Sport. So there's a pretty significant shuffle there. I think a lot of people will take some time to kind of get a better sense of what that means, in particular on the health file. But what jumps out at you through the lens of what the Alberta Chambers is paying attention to? Yeah, so with a cabinet shuffle, there's always that opportunity for, re-engaging relationships in new ways. I mean, we already have relationships with most of these ministers in their previous portfolios where, we always are in touch with them. We're always talking to them about policy. We're always talking to them about the priorities of the business community. So we're just looking forward to, now that's happened, just reestablishing new relationships with them, updating them on new portfolios and new priorities and policies that the Alberta Chamber has in place for their new ministries. And really advancing that meaningful dialogue on competitiveness and how we can work with them on things like red tape reduction, workforce development, energy infrastructure, all of the things we've been talking about, in the rest of this conversation. So just looking forward to reestablishing new relationships with them, and just updating them and bringing them up to speed on the policies in their new portfolios. Yeah. You were getting set on the 19th of June to pop bottles and to hand out hardware at the annual Alberta Business Awards of Distinction 2025 down in Cowtown, as Calgary will play host to this annual event that I know that hundreds of people are going to target. What are you looking forward to most? I've had the pleasure of being there several years. The energy in that room is phenomenal.
It's fantastic. I mean, I think I said this last year when we talked about it, but it is my favorite event. And I don't say that lightly because we do a lot of fantastic events throughout the year, and I really enjoy all of them. But to be able to just take a night, take a breath and take a night as a business community in the province of Alberta, and just really celebrate some fantastic, great success stories of businesses that have worked really hard to get to where they are and deserve to be celebrated. That's really exciting for me. We have finalists in 13 categories, so there's going to be 13 awards given out, which I'm really excited about. And that's everything from, business innovation to community attraction to Indigenous businesses being honored. And it just just, as you said, the energy and the feeling in the room in terms of the optimism for business in Alberta always leaves me, flying a little bit for a while. It gives me some wings gives me some wind beneath my wings, I guess, to keep doing what I'm doing in terms of advocating on behalf of Alberta business.
I love it. And it's not just like, I don't know, it's not just like who has the biggest bottom line or who had the most impressive growth. Like, there's so many different storylines. And I think that you also, you and your team have done a really marvelous job of shining light on kind of the creativity at play with some of these businesses. And like, it might be an overused word, but let's recognize why that is. Resilience. The reason why we're hearing that word so often is because there have been so many challenges for businesses, for entrepreneurs over the past 18 months. Actually, you know what? Let's say over the past 5 years.
Absolutely.
For that matter.
Since COVID, right?
Yeah.
It's been kind of a roller coaster. And it's the word is overused somewhat, resilience, but that's really the thing that we celebrate about our Alberta businesses. That and just how creative and innovative they are in terms of being able to continue their operations during tough times, look at new ways of delivering their products or new product lines, or how they're diversifying and enhancing their own productivity to continue to operate and do the things that they love and are passionate about. So it's so much fun to celebrate. And in June, we'll be doing a panel with winners on your show. I'm excited
on the 25th.
On the 25th?
On Wednesday, the 25th of June.
Yeah,
we're going to,
looking forward to that.
Yeah, we're leaving it up to your talented team. We said, give us 3 of the most, well, I see here, and now I'm going to sound like I'm picking favorites. I'm not, but they've got their work cut out for them because we got 3 spots for 13, award winners, really. But I think it's going to be awesome for this audience to hear from people that are doing big things. I always want, like sometimes we have these shows that are a bit of a gut punch, right? They're a bit of a smack in the face or a reality call, but they can sort of take on, I don't want to say a negative tone, but people kind of like leave that either feeling inspired or educated, but not necessarily feeling positive.
Absolutely.
And I know that this is going to be a Real Talk Roundtable on the 25th of June where people are going to walk away going, gosh, that those were exciting stories.
Yeah, absolutely. We're really looking forward to it.
Yeah.
And again, tickets are on sale now if anybody wants to
Is it
join
not yet
us.
sold? It's going to sell out. It sells out almost every year, doesn't it?
Yeah. So, but we welcome anybody joining us to celebrate, and anybody who knows any of the businesses that are finalists to come help celebrate with them too, because just to be a finalist is a real honor as well.
Well, and also it's just super fun.
Oh, it is.
You guys
super
have a
fun.
good time.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations on that. It's abchamber.ca if you want to get your tickets to the annual Alberta Business Awards of Distinction 2025. Again, that's the 19th of June. We'll link to all of this in the show notes. That's going to be down in Calgary. Just check out the events link on the Alberta Chambers of Commerce website. Shauna Feth is president and CEO of the Alberta Chambers, and we will look forward to not just the roundtable next month, but of course your next Eye on Alberta Business. Thanks for giving us such a keen understanding of what matters to folks that are doing business in this province. We're proud to call home.
Thanks, Ryan. My pleasure.
You got it. Let us know what you think on this. To talk at RyanJespersen.com. If you're doing business, whether it's the looming strike with Canada Post, whether it's maybe that energy corridor that caught your attention, inter-provincial trade barriers, we would love to hear the stories, as we've said, from the boots on the ground. How is political policy, like Shauna said, some of the talk actually manifesting itself or influencing how your business is walking the walk? Again, that's talk at RyanJespersen.com. Perhaps nobody in our, what do we want to call this, our family of sponsors and supporters better understands what business cares about than our friends at North Road Investment Council. You can find them online at northroadic.com. This is a team that understands there can be questions that are plaguing you, questions that are keeping you awake at night, questions like, hey, how do I protect my savings from taxes or inflation or a market crash? Or how do I make sure I don't run out of money? How do I make sure my nest egg looks healthy if I'm lucky enough to live into my 90s? Should I take my CPP early or wait? As your fiduciary financial advisors, North Road Investment Council offers a strategic approach to wealth management that aligns with your vision. No fluff, no pressure, just clear advice and strategies that make sense. They can answer your biggest retirement and financial planning questions. You're going to pay them a per-hour fee, not commissions that are going to be paid by selling you investment products. That's just one of the things that sets North Road Investment Council apart. You can kickstart the conversation with them. Understand more about digital risk advisory services by checking out their website, northroadic.com. solar-by-kubi.com. Our friends at Solar by Kubi are hiring right now across the country, as a matter of fact. You go to their website, kubi.ca, that's kuby.ca, click on Solar by Kubi, and then check out the careers link. That's where you'll be able to see the job postings that are available in real time, including current openings for solar PV experts in Edmonton. They're looking for a journey person in Lethbridge, a direct sales expert in Kelowna, an electrical engineer in Calgary. Anybody? That sounds like a pretty great opportunity. And of course, they're also hiring, as mentioned, across the country, including positions in Ottawa. Again, it's all at kubi.ca. Click on the solar link and careers. You can also book your free quote. It'll give you an idea of what it might look like to go green at your residence, your business, your farm. They do it all. The quotes are always free at kubi.ca. Hey, speaking of no-risk appointments, that's exactly what California Closets does to give you a better idea of how they could transform your space with a custom organizational system. You go to their website, californiaclosets.ca, and that's where you'll find examples of what they've done to transform living spaces, including living rooms, entertainment centers, garage storage systems. Maybe it's that dream walk-in closet in your primary bedroom. Maybe it's a Murphy bed to turn your home office into a guest room for mom and dad to come visit and spend the weekend. Laundry rooms, boot rooms, mud rooms, you name it, they do it. They can do it in any space with any budget, and all their installations manufactured in Alberta and guaranteed for life. You can request that free consultation today. Nothing to lose at californiaclosets.ca. And we want to make sure we shout out our friends at Athabasca University. That's Canada's anywhere, anytime university. Athabasca University is always open, and they're making education work for you. The AU experience is yours to create. And you can start by exploring their course and program offerings on their website. That's athabascau.ca. Hundreds and hundreds of programs and courses, including the Athabasca University MBA. You can check out distance learning programs, maybe a single course or a full program. The choice is always yours at athabascau.ca. All I can think about is the yellow brick road in Johnny's Golden Dome. I'm sorry, man. It's just, as the conversation has been going on, we realize that maybe Johnny Infamous has something to do, maybe a big part to do with the position that the Edmonton Oilers find themselves in right now, John, after a convincing 4-1 win on home ice in Game 4. The Edmonton Oilers are poised to beat Dallas on their home ice and advance to their second straight Stanley Cup final. How are you feeling?
Well, I called it. I said Oilers in 5. Remember, you said in 6, but hey.
We might be getting ahead of ourselves.
As everyone says, it's a best of 7, so let's not get, but a very nice position that the Oilers are in. Some little scary stuff with Zach Hyman there, who's been left
the game, did not return.
And just offensive and defensively. You never get a bad game from Zach Hyman. If he doesn't get points, if he doesn't score, if he's not passing, he's out there checking, he's out there running defense, and the opposite is true for the games when you don't get the checks from him. So, that was scary seeing him, because especially, an injury like that, when you're not looking and then you get hit, and then I really didn't like that he didn't even pick up the stick afterwards, and the arm was kind of limp. So you're thinking, is that wrist? Is that elbow? Is that shoulder? We don't know. They probably will never tell us. They'll say upper body injury day to day for the rest of until he's back. But yeah, Oilers, just a great game. But I'm not going to take any more credit.
Hang on.
I do look at everyone right now. Everyone's got their own thing of why the Oilers were winning, and it all has to do with them.
John, you're not going to want to hear this. You're not going to want to hear this.
Don't do it.
As we have been recording the show,
no,
and I want to give Tracy D. I want to give Tracy D credit and 2 points on the Real Talk scoreboard. As we have been doing this show, our friends at Oilers Nation have announced and confirmed that the Oilers' Zach Hyman is done for the season.
See what I mean?
And will require surgery.
See what I'm talking about, Ryan? It's a best of 7.
It's a best of 7.
Let's not speak too soon.
You know what, though? Every team deals with injuries, right? Every team is dealing with challenges. We were lucky enough to be in the barn last night, and if you follow me on Instagram, check out my stories, you can see I shared just some of the vibe that was in there last night. By the way, I was standing next to a grizzly bear of a man sitting next in the stands. This guy was like 6'9", with a voice even louder than mine, which is saying something, and he was setting the tone in our entire section, not just as the Oilers came out. I mean, it was absolutely bonkers in there, but if you let this continue to play, and you can follow me on Instagram at Ryan Jespersen. About 45 seconds left, the chant started, "We want the cup. We want the cup." And you know what? This is one of those things where you got to be careful. You got to be careful when you start busting out the "We want the cup." But the time felt right, and it was sending a message to the team. It was sending a message to the Dallas Stars, and for that matter, sending a message to the Florida Panthers as I continue to get ahead of myself and speak too far in advance. You know, congratulations to the Carolina Hurricanes for surviving and for living to see another day. But it looks to me like this is going to be a redux. This is going to be a return to the final for the Edmonton Oilers and the Florida Panthers. It's the exact matchup that I want. And I want the Oilers to roll into that with huge momentum. We could see a fabulous Stanley Cup final.
We could, but Florida is a scary team, and I've learned that now. Last year, I thought with the bounce back and everything, I thought, okay, we're going to handle them. And then watching them this year, they're even more, like, they're so precise in how they play their game. And they play the long game, Ryan. They slowly berate and chip away at you night after night. And then by game 6, game 7, you've got nothing left, and they come out flying, right? And they don't mind losing a game here and a game there. Look at them. They just lost 3-0 to Carolina. Do you think Florida's, nervous? No, they're not. The Moss Pit was also incredible last night. If you're going to click my story, if you're on Instagram, they threw a big Canadian flag over the Moss Pit for the first time ever, something they do indoors, and then they took that live on ESPN and Sportsnet, of course, and it was absolutely incredible. But everybody, there's me and
look at you and Alizé.
Up there in the
looking
Moss
like
Pit.
a couple of beauties.
But here you can see there's Hunter and the ODB kicking it off early, but then this was probably one of the best moments we've had in the Moss Pit here. Just everyone singing along, and they spread out that Canadian flag, and the drone flew over like it was Star Wars or something. It was absolutely incredible. But I agree. I like that you said it as you were getting riled up. Let's not get too ahead of ourselves, because right there, chanting "We want the cup," and then today, the hockey gods give you a little piece of karma in that, okay, let's see if you can do it without Hyman.
Can I tell you how I see this going? These are opportunities when teams, it's like Shauna was just talking about with businesses.
It's
when
a story being written.
Face adversity. Like nobody loves to lose Zach Hyman. The guy brings a grit and an incredible sort of an ability to rise to the occasion. Obviously, former 55 goals, 56, I think he scored, something like that. Like unbelievable scorer as well. But what about the other guys that can step up in big ways? This isn't a hockey show, but I will say that there are a number of players on that Oilers roster that can move up and down between lines, right? You can put Corey Perry on power play 1, and he'll answer in a big way like he did last night, and then Perry can also be a third liner. You could put Colson up there playing with McDavid on the first or second line, put him with Draisaitl, or you have him down on the fourth line doing an amazing job. I'm not saying bring Jeff Skinner back in. I don't even know what the deal is with him.
But
at
Echo
the same
coming
time,
back.
You got guys, you got Ekholm hopefully coming back. So you see the infusions of energy. It's kind of like addition, subtraction, and at the end of the day, you just hope that your biggest, most important players are your biggest, most important players. I see in the live chat, and I reflected live chat powered by Park Power, that many of you are wanting me to STFU about talking about the Stanley Cup final before we're even there. I will recognize that DK in our chat says it was unbelievable. He says, I watched from the rooftop at the Ice House, which would have meant he was here in your style beats.
He was looking
says
down
it was
on us.
so much fun hearing everybody chant, "We want the cup."
It is fun, but let's save that for when
nervous,
we're in the round. Go ahead, start from the first game. But
Lauren's concerned that I'm talking out of my ass. Gizmo's not wrong. Says Brad Marchand has really added a lot of grit to Florida. Says he is vicious out there. Brad Marchand is really, really hungry for a Stanley Cup. But you know who's hungrier? The Edmonton Oilers.
Connor
That's
McDavid.
Right.
It's the hungriest.
I like Tracy says bring back Derek Ryan. Absolutely 100%. The guy who's on the probably hole 17 or 18 of his career. Why not get him back? And how about Michael, who says I foresee the nude Nuge upping his game. I don't know how that's even possible, Michael, because he's been
an
playing
incredible game
so
last night.
well. He's been playing amazingly
Wild.
well, but I do think that Nuge has more. Ken, Super Chat Ken says either Jeff Skinner, like Jespo said, or Matt Jones could come back into the lineup. I like Matt Jones, man. That guy is a shit disturber. Unbelievable. Says we'll see if there'll be enough. Says Florida is a wheel, even better than last year. But so are we.
Yes.
Right? Everybody's saying, you know what? I am getting too ahead. I'm going to stop.
But
We will
Florida
talk
is
at
like
the right.
this
We will
is
talk
like-
at the right time about this.
This is like Star Wars. Like they're the whole storyline with Kachuk. He used to be on the Flames, and we hate him, and like just the whole way they play, brutal. You know, they have a lot of skill, but they rely more on just chipping away at you, whereas Oilers is more about finesse and stuff like that and passing and stuff like that and sticking to their game. It's the greatest storyline ever, right? You get the bad guys and the good guys. Obviously, all of Canada is going to be cheering for the Oilers, save for the Canuck fans who just hate us. We're going to be cheering for the Panthers to squash us again. But this is just going back to back, making it to the final, which again, I know we're saying that ahead of time, but look at the way they're playing. Look at the odds on coming back after being down 3-1.
Yeah.
It's going to be an epic storyline again. And I'm just like, I'm so excited for it, but I'm so scared because of the way it turned out last time.
Don't
too.
be scared.
I want to be scared, and then I want to have joy at the end, right? I don't want to be overconfident.
I think what you
I
have.
don't want to be overconfident.
First of all, you have wisdom in not being overconfident. But
I've never been told I've had wisdom.
May I suggest you're not so much scared as you have a healthy nervousness. There's healthy nerves.
I learned my lesson last time.
Healthy nerves
right?
are a good thing.
I was too planning the parade last time. This time I'm going to be reserved.
Aaron says Florida is a dirty, dirty team. She says they are very good, but they are dirty as fuck. From Aaron.
We'd be happy to have a couple of those dirt bags on our
Wouldn't
team
we?
to help us win.
Wouldn't we?
It's all fun and games, but then we were we were cheering on Marchand when he was on Team Canada, right?
I'm seeing some decent comments as well from a contributor to our Real Talk Live chat. But if you name yourself Ryan Lies a lot, am I really going to read your comments?
I've been seeing that name, and I'm like, I'm not going to mention it.
I love it.
I love it too.
I love it, but I'm not reading any of your comments till you change your handle. But I love this. Michael says Florida is the modern day Flyers. They're dirty. I don't know if anybody's the modern day Flyers.
That's a little too
I think
open.
back to I had a buddy that we were talking about Nurse's slash on Rupe Hintz, and he was just saying that was like Bobby Clark against Harlamov back in the days. That was like the old school when they were just like, that guy's a problem, so we're going to go break his ankle. That was kind of how they rolled.
Make no
back in the
mistake,
day.
like Florida, they still have finesse play. Like Barkov is just like, oh my god,
one of the best in the league.
I would love if that guy was on the Oilers.
Let's quit pumping their tires.
Well, yeah. What do you want to be in the final against a team that has nobody? Like, they're in the final for a reason 2 years in a row. They're the defending champs for a reason. But you're right, Ryan. You don't want to go up against someone you know you can beat. You want to slay the dragon that you couldn't slay last
100%.
year. It's going to feel way better.
It's like the Oilers did against the New York Islanders to win their first cup. I absolutely love the parallel. I think it's great. And I don't know if it means anything, but I had a business lunch. Real Talker's happy to let you know that we'll be welcoming a new partner to the show in the next little bit. Very exciting. That's always exciting when we get to roll out the red carpet and welcome someone new to the fold. As I wrapped up my meeting yesterday and stood up, there was Mr. McDavid. McDavid Sr. Today's Walter Gretzky. Brian McDavid standing right there. And I said, how's it going? And he looked at me and his eyes said, who are you? And I said, Mr. McDavid. I said, I used to be up on the Jumbotron. He goes, right. I said, how are we all feeling? He said, we're feeling good. I said, and it's an exciting time for your family. He said, it's an exciting time for oil country. I said, isn't that right? And shortly after shaking Mr. McDavid Sr.'s hand, the Oilers went on to win 4-1 to take a stranglehold on the series against the Dallas Stars. Read into it what you will, my friends. Read into it what you will.
I like that you didn't omit the part where he said, who are you?
No, his eyes said, who are you?
Oh, his eyes did.
No, his eyes said, who are you?
Okay.
That kind of like, you know what it's like for someone like him? Never mind his son.
God. Do you know how many
Someone
handshakes
like him,
he does a day?
handshakes?
How
many people he just wants?
just
He just wants
disinfecting. He's
people like me.
disinfecting
He
all
wants
day.
us to leave him alone. But I couldn't. I had to share my joy.
It's true.
His daughter-in-law is opening a new bar. His son's about to go win the Stanley
Grand
Cup.
opening.
Let's
yeah.
go.
Congrats.
All right. Oil Country, we want to know where you're at on this. And from our friends that are tuning in from Calgary Flames Country, our Canucks friends, and, of course, supporters of the Toronto Maple Leafs, Ottawa Senators, Montreal Canadiens, and other teams. We'd like to know where your head's at
Jets.
as well. Is this... Did I omit the Jets?
Yes.
Whoops.
I was like, don't do that.
No offense, Winnipeg.
We love you guys.
It's not the first time we've briefly forgotten about Winnipeg before remembering the important role that the Winnipeg Jets have played in sustaining excellence in Canadian hockey over the many, many years.
And our listeners.
I still can't believe.
Thank you, Winnipeg
I still
listeners.
can't believe Connor Hellebuck's collapse this year. Unbelievable. He's
Can you
still going to
believe
win the Vezina.
Of course.
He's still going to win the Vezina, but
It's
man,
incredible.
if
It's
you're
just-
a Jets fan, this is one of the. The President's Trophy. What?
Yeah.
What? Like, what? This was supposed to be the year, man.
This is I don't play a lot into superstition, but when things like this happen, like, how can you say it's anything other than, like, I don't know. It's not karma. It's not. Is it mental? I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
But it's just when it comes to playoff time, he's not the same guy.
Tobias says, no important people really know who Ryan is. Tobias, I just want to thank you for spending 90 minutes of your morning listening to me talk. And to the rest of you, thank you for being a part of the show. If something that you've heard on this show has resonated with you, you can do us the biggest favor and share it with your friends and family. Let them know what's happening here. Maybe it was the insights from Shauna Feth through the Alberta Eye on Alberta Business, courtesy of the Alberta Chambers of Commerce. Maybe it was a hot take from Supriya. I'm already excited to post the highlight of her talking about the divorce messaging to kids. Nothing funny about divorce, but when you bring in the political metaphors, it really works well. And of course, our friends at Tourism Jasper with that Maligne Boat Cruise now wide open for business. Again, as we wrap today, a huge thank you to those of you that helped us sell out the Real Talk Golf Classic for the 4th year in a row. It's going to be an unbelievable day in support of a wonderful cause, the Real Talk Julie Rohr Scholarship. A reminder that we are accepting applications for that scholarship up until August 1st. Go to our website, ryanjespersen.com, for more on it. Click on the Connect link. If you know a student, post-secondary student that's lost a parent to cancer, that $5,000 support annually could be theirs. Until next time, Real Talkers, we'll see you soon.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jespersen, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Brandy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harman Candola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjespersen.com.